We're gonna go ahead and get started. If you can go ahead and get settled. So this is the second session for the City of Urbana Alternative Response Task Force Focus Group. Today, our consultants from LEAP are going to give another brief presentation, followed by a brief stakeholder discussion. And then after that, there will be another question and answer period with our stakeholders to gather more feedback from you guys. With that being said, I will go ahead and turn it over.
Well, hello everybody. Super excited to be here with you all today. Just to start us off, we're going to go through our meeting objectives, our goals for today. So our first one is review key data related to stakeholder concerns. Last time we were here, you guys brought up some concerns, and we have some data points to bring up. Then two, prepare to review actual Urbana call narratives by understanding in more detail, one, what calls existing community responder programs are handling, and two, what credentials/skills are required of responders. So why are we talking about this? Why is it important for us to know what other cities are doing if we're focusing on Urbana, right? The goal really is to make sure that we are designing a program where responders feel equipped to handle those calls. And with call types, they end up really structuring the key programmatic details of a community responder program, such as the responder type, what skills, right? Where should it be housed? The call types really shape those key programmatic details. So we want to get you guys at a good place of understanding what is happening within this field, so that we can get you on board and prepared to determine that for your own city. You can go to the next slide. So the recap of last time. The last time we were here, we looked at a bird's eye view of 911 calls from Urbana, and we saw the red slices of the chart. And the red slices of the chart is where other community responder programs are focusing their call types. And so we have shaped the Alternative Response Task Force focus to the red slices of the chart. And today, there we go. And today we will go into more detail of what types of calls programs are handling within the red slice of the chart. You can go to the next slide.
Is it possible to make it less blurry or to make it full screen?
This is as big as we can get it with the current screen, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
We tested this 6 ways to Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it, okay.
Sorry.
Before I go over this slide, I just wanted to tell you guys, I met last night an immigrant from Jamaica, and he was telling me how much he loved Urbana, how safe he felt here, how much he loved the city council, the people, how much he loved the police department, and then his big question is, have you met the new mayor? So apparently you're a big deal. So no, but it was really nice to hear between the airport and the hotel how wonderful Urbana is and everybody that lives here. So it was nice. I thought I'd share that this morning, or this afternoon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about safety, and I will, because I do know that it's kind of difficult to be able to read, at least for me it is, what's on the slide. I'll repeat what the different graphics say on the slide to make sure that you guys can catch it. I'm lucky to have it right here in front of me. So last meeting we all talked about the safety of responders being important. And when I first learned about community responders, that was my first concern was, you know, that's going to be a disaster. They're going to be hurt. It's going to be, you know, big problems. But, you know, I have really intentionally in all the community responder programs all over the country asked these questions very specifically. Who on your team has gotten hurt? What has happened on your team where someone's, you know, safety was compromised or they were hurt or seriously injured? And I keep hearing, no, we've dealt with thousands of people and nothing has ever happened. Not that it couldn't happen. I mean, someone could come in here now and do something bad to us. I mean, anything can happen. But in the last over 500,000 calls, 500,000 calls of people responding to these calls for service in a community responder role, there hasn't been someone killed or seriously injured. So it can happen, as we talked about, but the likelihood is it's not happening, which is very blessed, which is part of the program setup and the training and the picking the right responders and working with the right people. So along with that, a couple jurisdictions actually keep track of whether or not the responders feel safe. So after they go to calls, they take a little survey. Did you feel safe on that call? Did you feel safe? And Durham and New Orleans is where Dee's from, just there a couple weeks ago, it's rougher than Urbana. I'll just say that. And 1% or less than 1% of individuals that are doing community response work in New Orleans and in Durham, where they actually are doing the surveys, have felt like on calls, less than 1% of the calls where they feel like they're in danger, or they feel unsafe. Another thing is, a lot of times police departments, and I am a 30-year veteran of police, so I think these things. They think, you know, hey, we're going to get community responders, and we're going to have to roll in and back them up all the time because things are going to go sideways, and we're going to have to help. So there's data on that too. So there is a graph up there, and it is the top graph. And the top graph is, and you can't see a red sliver there, but there is one, a real tiny one, because in Durham, North Carolina, they needed emergency backup 0.04% of the time in 2024. Is when they had to call police for emergency backup. And over 3 years with the Dayton's MRU program, they called for emergency, like a lights and sirens police backup once, and that was an entertaining story. That actually was a homeowner holding someone who was going to break into the house at bay in the backyard at gunpoint. And the community responders were called the police, and the police came, and nobody got hurt. Denver Star program didn't call the police once in their first year. And Antioch's AQCRT team, in the last year and a half, about 0.02% of the time where they've called for backup. So the top graph represents that. If you can see a little red line in there, that's 0.02% of the time where they call for emergency backup. If you can't see the red line, that means your eyes are probably healthy as well, because it's very small. So just as, you know, the reason we're here is because people have said law enforcement is not always the best response to every call for service. Well, community responders aren't always the best response for every call for service either. So there are times where community responders need to call law enforcement and say, hey, we need the police here, not for emergency backup, but for other reasons, and we'll actually talk about those reasons on the next slide. But about 3% in Dayton, San Francisco, Durham, about 2 to 3% of the time where community responders show up, they end up saying, hey, we need the police over here for this. They call the police. Not emergency, they just call them, and we'll talk about it why in a second. 1% in Oakland and Albuquerque. So the slide on the graphic before that, on the lower right, that was 3% of the time community responders go, they call police. So as we look at the next slide, and I will definitely need to call these out because this will be in front of me and I can't read that. So what are these 3%? So again, these 3% are out of the 97% of the calls, or there's 97% of the calls that they go to and don't call the police. 2 to 3% of the times I do say, hey, we need the police's help here. This is not emergency related. So this is not, we need lights and sirens because everything's broken. So the blue portion is the most prominent, And that is where you have problems that are just persistent. So you have somebody, the writing up there says, like someone needs medical attention. Or maybe it's a noise complaint and they won't stop, and they're not going to listen to the community responder. It could be a trespassing, where someone just refuses to leave, and you call police.
Or even situations where someone is like, I legally want them trespass.
Right. Or it could be an indecent exposure where they show up and someone doesn't pull their pants back up or something, and they say, hey, we really need police. So that's the blue section. So that's about 40% of the 3%. That's the problem's persistent. The other one is they need police service. So maybe they need a voluntary commitment, for a mental health hold. Maybe they need somebody officially trespass, like Dee said. This is the red section now. Maybe they need to file a police report because there's a missing person that's been found, or a theft or something like that. Or maybe they needed to force in a door. Maybe they're on a check on the welfare and the door's locked and they need to force the door open, and they need to call the police to be able to help with that. So there are times where the police need called. The yellow is because maybe it's got escalated before or after the responder got there. Not a lights and sirens escalated, but maybe someone's started to give signs that they're going to become physical, and so they call the police to be able to help out. And then the green, which is about 12.5% of the 1%, or the 3%. The green is where people say, hey, we just wanted the police to show up. And sometimes that happens, where they say, hey, we don't want a community responder, we want a police officer. And I mean, we're here to provide the best service to citizens, so if they want a police officer, okay. Some people will. So again, this is the 3% that's referred to the police, not calling the police for emergency backup. You can go to the next slide. So before we move forward, and we're going to be talking about some programs in specific, as far as like what kind of, I'm going to give you a bird's eye, and then Dee's going to get more granular on some of the departments specifically that we work with that have these community responder programs. But just before we go there, did anybody have any other questions about responder safety? And I'm going to actually read the question just in case you can't, including the safety record of these different programs. Yes?
Yeah, I wanted to ask for a comparison between the safety of having a community or alternate responder and a police officer respond. And if there happens to be data between like a crisis intervention team trained police officer versus a general patrol officer. I just wondered, as we're looking at the numbers, how it compares to police response.
So, Amos, do you want to chime in on that?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, well, it's great to be back. Sorry I'm not there in person. I am happy to take this question, although I wish I had a better answer. So it is very hard to compare apples to apples when you are even in a city that has community responders doing lots of responses and non-CIT trained police and police, because they get sent to different calls. And if you have community responders and police operating in the same city at the same time, they're not sending community responders and police to equivalent calls. They're going to be sending police to calls that tend to need a police response more often than not. And that means that it's very hard to make a real clear judgment about that. So there have been new academic studies that have come out pretty recently, because they take forever to do and then publish. And so we can share some, in fact, I think in our next presentation we will look at, specific research findings, but we will, collect for you sort of what is the research showing. There have not been any studies that have shown differences in things like use of force. I think the sample size of uses of force is so small that it's very hard to show if, those rates are changing, or, to show why they're changing. And there is some papers looking at changes in quantities of arrests, in crime, and then there are some, I think what else might be relevant. Those are, looking at changes in arrests and changes in crime are the main things that people have been able to actually come up with results in those studies. And they get very complicated to try to make a methodology that really is comparing apples to apples. So that's my long answer with not a lot of hard numbers, but we will come back to you with those specific research studies so you can see what is out there.
And I will say, based on my career, and that the chief he may say the same thing. Officers, your use of forces a lot of times can come down to a culture of a program or the culture of a department. There are some departments I know where I live in Texas, they pride themselves on kicking butt. So, and they are competitive to see who can be the most conservative and the hardest core in this area where I live. So obviously that culture probably has more uses of force than a culture that respects people and respects people's spaces. And so the same with the program. If you have a culture of a department or a culture of a program that is conducive to valuing human beings, then you're going to have lower use of force. And also the education piece, who you hire, and if someone does have CIT training or the 40-hour or the 8-hour mental health first aid training, I think it's called behavioral health or mental health first aid. Yeah, so the more you know, or the more maybe you have experience in your own family, the better you know how to be able to handle situations. So there's a lot of variables there, but I think culture might be, to me, culture and education are some of the biggest. So I don't think you guys have to concern yourself with that here. So any other questions on responder safety? How about any of the reasons why the calls get referred to the police? Does that surprise you? We talked about calls getting referred to the police. Like maybe persistent problems. I wanted the police in the first place. We have to take a report because a crime happened or it's a missing person. It could be a variety of different reasons. This person's getting a little too heated. We need somebody else here to be able to handle it. Okay. And then any general community responder concerns left unsaid from last time. I know we talked about a couple things last time, the safety of responders, logistical issues at in dispatch we'll get to. We talked about the CESA and how that's going to fit into this later. Anything else that we need to make sure that we're remembering? And we're recording this, by the way, so we do remember. Yes, sir.
So, speaking from a domestic violence context, one of my biggest takeaways from the documentary on the HEART program out in Durham was one of the community responders' response when they were asked to go to a follow-up call the next day after a domestic battery call. And he was irate and he expressed sincere fear for his safety. My question, well, it's more of a leading question because that is one of the components that we from domestic violence see, advocate safety. What sort of implementation for safety programs and protocols are there in the community responder model?
Okay. Amos, do you want to share any about any responder anything that resonates with you about that question? Do you need the question repeated?
Well, I think I got the question. Thank you. And I'll just repeat sort of what I took away was, what protocols are there for what community responders do when they see evidence of domestic violence, when they show up to a call and are confronted with evidence of domestic violence. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. This is a great question. Of course, it's a very important issue, and it is something that, you know, can absolutely come up in many different call types. And so generally, first of all, there's a lot of training on this issue, knowing what to look for and what, you know, where to make referrals or when to reach out to the police, etc. I have not, I try to collect as many protocols as possible, and I have to look back at my list to see if I have a specific example protocol on what to do. I do not believe I've seen them written, and that may just be because I was not successful in getting my hands on one. I know that there is a very important part of training. I'm just not sure what sort of a written protocol programs are actually using. So I'm sorry that I don't have a sample to share on that one. I do try to have samples as much as possible.
I'm okay with silence. I want to see if anyone else has any more answers to 1, 2, or 3 before we move on.
We'll circle back with that one too, the domestic one. Okay, is somebody playing the drums like that? Is there like a, yeah. Pretty good. Okay, so we're going to talk just for a few minutes at a high level, and then Dee's going to go, again, more granular on this. So we're going to talk about some different way LEAP puts community responder call categories, and I'm going to go ahead and read some of these that are up there so you don't have to worry about reading it. So there's 4 different kinds of call categories we're going to talk about: service connection, mental health, substance use, and conflict resolution. So service connection, community responders, is usually a need for social services like housing, food, treatment, employment, some quality of life issue. And so some of the sample situations here are like maybe someone's panhandling, blocking sidewalks, loitering, maybe a suspicious person. A lot of those end up being service connection related. Mental health revolves around a person's mental health. And so those type of calls that CRs respond to would be like a welfare check or a mental health crisis. Obviously not a mental health crisis where someone has a knife or gun or a weapon, or who's actively being violent, or someone who might be suicidal. Those all fit under the mental health. Substance use is a person abusing substances, like somebody that's intoxicated, maybe drug use or an overdose. And then conflict resolution, so non-violent conflicts between 2 or more individuals. So it could be a verbal dispute between a parent and a child, landlord and tenant disagreement, neighbors disagreeing over something, business and a customer disagreeing over something. Could be total strangers, any non-violent conflict between 2 people. So on the next slide, I'll name at a high level some of the departments that are doing these things. Service connection, Allegheny County, Colorado Springs, Dayton, Durham, Evanston, Springfield, and 36 other programs. So a lot of people are doing the service connection. Mental health, Bangor, Chapel Hill, Durham, Indianapolis, Tulsa, Olympia, and 71 other programs. So a lot of people are doing the mental health. Substance use, Cincinnati, Cookeville, Durham, Flagstaff, Madison, Santa Fe, and 35 other programs. So a lot of people are doing this. Conflict resolution, Dayton, which is the Dayton Mediation Response Unit, so that's actually in the name. Durham, Modesto, and then 10 other programs are doing conflict resolution as well. And I am going to pass it over to Dee to go into a little bit more detail on a few of these programs.
And so we use those categories to truly, the call type categories to better understand the call types, and also, I hate to say it, but to put them in a category. So for example, if I see a call and there's like homeless person blocking the doorway, would love to get them some help, I would categorize that call as a service connection. What is the primary reason why this person called? Is it because they want them to be removed, or is it because they want them to receive help? And that's kind of how we categorize those calls. Same with if someone says, hey, I actually feel like I saw a call in Urbana where someone had like a needle, and someone called, and I categorize that call obviously as substance use, right? But it could connect to some of those other categories, but I just try to think about the primary reason for that call. But you can go to the Dayton slide. So we've just told you that other cities are handling calls within these categories, and we showed you an overview of the cities that are, again, handling calls within these categories. But I want to show you now is the actual calls that are being handled by current community responder programs. So we'll start with Dayton, and if you've noticed, I have used Dayton, Evanston, and Durham in our last two presentations as like our case study cities. They all are doing community responder very differently. So I wanted you to take pattern to that and take notice to how they all are designing their programs, as well as showing the diversity within call types. So the top call types for Dayton's mediation response unit in 2024, I'll read them out, was welfare check, allotting for 30%. A disorderly subject, peace officer request, neighbor trouble, loud noise complaint, juvenile complaint, telephone calls, dumping or littering, and mental health. Just based on those top calls that they are currently handling, you can see that they are handling calls within almost every category that we just showed you. There's some calls related to mental health, welfare checks, disorderly subjects, which is can relate to calls of removing a person, removal of subject. Oftentimes, some of those calls where it's a disorderly subject, someone wants them removed from their business or their doorway, or something like that. You can go to the next one. This one might be a little hard to see, so I highly encourage y'all to go back to the presentation, which Tarek and Darcy make sure that you all get, so that you can actually see this for yourself. Not only that, the data that I pulled, at least specifically from Durham, is actually on their website. So you can go into their data dashboard and click around and see what kind of calls they're responding to. You can even see what service area they are handling and responding to in Durham. But I wanted to list the top 10 call types. It was super long, and I tried to screenshot it and make it very nice for you all. But the top ones is trespass or unwanted person, a non-urgent welfare check, a mental health crisis, an urgent welfare check, nuisance or intoxicated, a heart assist, suicide threat, indecent or prostitution, disturbance, assist person, and crisis call diversion. If you look, you'll see that the most calls that they're handling is within trespass or unwanted, non-urgent welfare check, mental health crisis, and urgent welfare checks, as well as nuisance and intoxicated. But those are those top 5 call types, and you'll see that like unwanted and trespass is a very common call type within all of the programs that I'll show you. So there's a lot of people calling in to 911 every single day, wanting someone removed, wanting someone trespassed, or sometimes just wanting help. I see a lot of calls that are literally just like, I'm concerned for this homeless man, or it's super cold outside. Can we get someone to come and get them some help? But these calls will get categorized as trespass or unwanted. There's very rarely a call type that's like, caller wants person to get help. It gets filed within the codes that already exist within MetCat's data. So that's why we try to get a deeper dive into the call narratives to get a better understanding of what is happening in those calls. You can go to the next slide. And this is Evanston, which is right around the way. And here I list the call types that they are currently handling. One is lost and confused person, which surprisingly happens a lot. Nuisance complaint. I mentioned last time, you guys laughed at me, but leaf blower violations is very serious in Evanston, and now their program is handling those calls. So believe me when I tell you, it is a big deal, and it is heavily related to conflict resolution because it drives some neighbors insane. The next one is well-being checks, also welfare checks. I believe theirs is called well-being checks. Miscellaneous public service, city ordinance violation, mental health subject, panhandling, soliciting complaint, and vagrant. You'll see the last three kind of are very similar, just with different names. But again, if you've looked at the pattern across these programs, a lot of them are handling calls related to removal of person or panhandling, and if you go deeper into this data, a lot of these calls involve someone who is homeless or someone who has some type of substance use issue, and even children sometimes are a part of these calls, where a child may be walking outside in the cold and there's no jacket, and someone calls about their concern. You'll be able to see with the call types that I've presented to you all that each one of them are doing things very differently. They all have different call types names, but the essence of what they are responding to is still the same. They're very much service connection heavy, connecting people to services, as well as mental health. Each one of these programs are responding to calls related to mental health, and as well as conflict resolution, right? Just the leaf blower alone, those calls are related to conflict resolution. We can go to the next slide. Again, I apologize for how hard this is to see, but I wanted to show you actual calls that were handled by a community responder program. So to the left, we have the call type. In the middle, we have the narrative, which are the actual notes taken by the dispatcher when the person calls 911. And then to the right of it, we have the category that LEAP would categorize it as. So for the first one, the call type was a welfare check. It says male wearing gray flannel, blue jeans, yelling that he is lost. Looking at it, you might be able to say mental health, right? But I don't know if that person is having some type of mental health episode or if they're just genuinely lost, right? So I put it under service connection. And again, these are calls that were actually handled by a community responder program. So these calls were sent to an unarmed responder instead of the police. We have a Muni Code violation, which Evanston handles Muni Code violations. This data does not come from Evanston, but I'm just making the connection. So again, the call type is Muni Code violation. The call narrative is, there are subjects selling items on the corner here, and caller wants subject moved along. And that went into the service connection category. Then we have loitering complaint. Transient female regularly comes in bothering customers, eating the food she stole, and just want her to leave. Right? I feel like last time we were here, we talked about crimes of poverty. I think what is so interesting with these call narratives that we see is like you would imagine that they would be upset that she's eating the food that she stole, but really they just want her to move along. They don't want to trespass. They don't want to put her in jail. And I will say, people are very honest with dispatchers about what they want. If they want police, if they want to trespass, they are very clear. And so when I look at this, I see that The caller just wants them to not be a problem for them versus being a problem for the system and putting them in jail as a result of stealing food, right? And then I put it in service connection because I'm pretty sure there's a reason why she stole the food. Most people don't just steal food because they want the food. They probably stole it because they're hungry. So I put that in service connection. We have music complaint next. It says neighbors here were arguing and now female is in a vehicle playing loud music and honking the horn. If we just take out the beginning part, neighbors, female is now playing music in the loud vehicle, it still would have been a noise complaint, but I heavily put it under conflict resolution because they were arguing already, right? So we know that this is an intense situation. They have been arguing, and now someone is being even more annoying by beeping the horn and playing loud music. So that call was categorized under conflict resolution. Disorderly subject. Male has been bothering customers on and off, keeps coming back, and is an ongoing issue currently. We all review the data, me, Amos, other people on my team, and sometimes we categorize them a little differently. Just looking at this, I probably would have categorized it as service connection, but because it stated that this was an ongoing issue, it's very clear that the caller has some type of relationship with the subject that they are calling about. So I categorize that under conflict resolution versus a service connection, because it's very clear sometimes in these notes when you can see that the caller has some type of relationship with the subject or they are annoyed by the subject, and they'll mention it like, this is an issue, this has been going on for months, right? They are very clear about how long this has been going on and the familiarity with the subject. The next one is neighbor trouble. Neighbor is harassing caller, keeps knocking on her door, blocked vehicle in her driveway. I put this under conflict resolution, very similar to the music complaint above, but clearly people have issues with their neighbors, and sometimes it is not a call where 911 needs to come out and mediate between two neighbors and teach them how to coexist with each other. The next one is mental health. Caller believes people are in his apartment trying to kill him again. That again was categorized under mental health. And then the last one, public drunk. Caller reports that their brother is intoxicated, probably has mental health issues, and he needs some help. That call was categorized under substance issue. I try to think about the primary goal of the call. She's calling because her brother is intoxicated, and the mental health was the second ladder. I think the call could have been categorized as both, but we don't have a categorization that says substance use / mental health. So I have to pick the one that best represents this situation, and in this moment, it was substance use. So I'm going to stop right there and open it up for discussions. So I'll read all of the questions out loud, and then we'll start with number one. The first one is, what stood out to you most about the call types of other cities' programs? Number two, what do you think the call types chosen by other programs say about their goals and priorities? A secondary to that is, how might Urbana's goals be different from other programs? And then third, what would make a call type not appropriate for Urbana, even if other cities are handling it?
I could sort of go to question one, but I just wanted to go back to that last slide. That second to last one really bothers me because not all people with mental illness are wrong when they're feeling paranoid. Yeah. So I hope there was context, that they knew there was no one else in the apartment. I mean,
the unfortunate part about all of this is exactly what 911 call takers get, right?
Then I'm going to answer number one.
Because oftentimes and you guys can speak to this as well. That's the most information that you get. Like male wearing gray flannel, like that is the only thing that I take out of here is personal identifying information, right? And so that comes with the territory of doing this work, because oftentimes you want more information, but you're not going to get it until you get to that call.
Well, I'm going to acknowledge that I'm very risk averse. Like I read contracts. Right, and I also, but this is what I was thinking before, which is in response to number one, and I don't think I should respond to the other two questions, but also started with Ms. Chenoweth's question about data on the different impacts of a CIT response and a officer without CIT training. And in this community, we have years and years and years and years and years of experience with CIT responses versus officers who didn't have CIT training. But the data, the issues around data collection are very important. We can't make conclusions about those responses because the data were not kept the same way, and this goes back to dispatchers, and I have never had more sympathy for dispatchers than I did when you were reading the call types. And I thought, how does anyone make, it's like a doctor being expected to diagnose something by an eyewitness calling and saying, I think this guy is sick. Like that is, I am so sorry, Betsy.
Yes.
I'm sorry that we've sat at all these meetings and I never felt so much empathy for y'all, but here we are.
And what makes it worse is they don't know what happens at all. They get to hear somebody's trauma be told to them via the phone, and then they have no clue what happens next, right? And again, I think your point that you're making is you don't know the context of that, right? Sometimes, like this, let's speak on the mental health narrative. This could have been a situation where he's just in an episode, right? There's no weapons or anything. That could have easily been handled by a officer who is eager to control the situation, right? And that could have happened very differently. However, in this case, a community responder was able to go in and handle the situation, and this call was not at all handled by an officer, right?
Or everyone could have died.
Yep.
So there's also
Things happen. And then I want to say, I encourage you to, I know you said you didn't want to answer the other two, but I encourage you to be as honest as possible. If you didn't want to answer because you were like, oh, I don't know, they might.
I think you have people at this table with much more expertise around these issues.
Okay. Chief Boone.
Yeah, I was just going to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
To number one. After the first meeting we had here, my staff and I reached out to Evanston, and we spent about an hour or a little more with them. And everything you guys, Tom, D, have said have been exact in terms of their challenges, what they're seeing, things of that nature. What gave me comfort was that the police department embraced it, and they saw it as a plus rather than a negative. So I remember in the early 90s, we tried this in Norfolk, Virginia, and one bad experience kind of jaded my perspective on it. Now that was during the era of crack cocaine, who knows, right? We had a service provider investigating a minor accident. The guy was cracked out of his mind, and it just went bad. But that was the only incident that destroyed a program in its infancy stages. But getting back to the police chief in Evanston, they are over the moon about their program. And again, not to sound like a broken record, they really embrace it. Their biggest challenge is just as you posted it. Okay, so sort of a litmus test for you all. You guys are on the spot.
Oh, well, thank you. We are super happy about that because we designed Evanston's program. But just to add on to what you're saying, Chief Boone, Chief Stewart was super, invested in community response when we were designing the program. She was a part of almost every meeting. In fact, she wanted it to be housed within her department. That's how serious she was about this. Unfortunately, we had to stir her away and let her know this is not the trend of this field. But she was amazing. Parks and Recs, yes, it is. And that was a decision that came out of many people in Evanston saying that that would have been the most appropriate place, and they have programs that complement the community responder program, and that's kind of why I landed there. What other background information provided to you in confidence, I'm pretty sure Chief Stewart feels the way she feels, and that is 100% valid. But the point that I'm making is that she was involved from the very beginning, which allowed us to get support from all rank and file officers, as well as her supporting officers. So thank you for that. Yes.
And ma'am, I just wanted to go back and reiterate again, when it comes to the CIT training or the mental health first aid training, that is all great. And that does better prepare people to be able to handle situations, or if they have life experience. But really, truly, I have seen in multiple different departments, it's the culture of that department that will override any type of training they get. And so I think you have a good culture here, and so the training, the people good on top just makes them better at it. But to be able to really pinpoint data, you know, you could have the same training in two different departments and guys will respond and women will respond completely different.
Chair would like to speak.
Announcing my presence. So I don't know if it's the exact answer to some of these, but it kind of is related. A couple things for our community that'd be interested to know how it intersects with the data you've collected. One is responses to things like school fights or responses related to juveniles in general.
Okay.
I think that would be really helpful information to have. I don't know if anything comes to mind off the top of anyone's head. And then also thinking about, and this briefly came up in the last session as well, but thinking about cultural and linguistic competencies. So like, what are the responses? Is there a difference that we're seeing if folks need services in a language other than English? So I think my question / comment is, you know, that information isn't here. So I'm curious if that is something that has come up in the research related to programs that are already existing, or if not, I guess it's a request that we make sure that we're factoring those pieces in.
Yes, I remember that specifically, and I feel like one of the calls, even though I didn't choose it for this this presentation, is there. These programs are handling calls with juveniles. I'm gonna have to go back and look at them so I can tell you exactly what they are, but I do remember that, and you were like the second person to bring this up for Urbana, so we will be sure to not only make sure about responses to juvenile, but as well as linguistic acknowledgement. Yes. And and I just want to add, sorry, that there is a call type around juvenile problems. I didn't add it in, but for the next time and for follow-up state, I will show you some narratives that relate to juvenile problems. Mm-hmm.
That was a really great observation. Thank you. This is a highly multicultural community, and I think maybe I'm here so long I forget. So thank you for mentioning it.
Well, what a fantastic opportunity as you're building this team to be able to make sure that you cover everybody who lives in your community. So I know, like in Dayton, there's a lot of new Americans in the Dayton area, but they also have people that can speak Spanish or other languages as part of their team, and they also have great connections with the local nonprofits that might have interpreters, or like a Welcome Dayton that works and helps connect people from the immigrant community. Yes.
Didn't you talk to us last time about the mass violence in Dayton, right? The mass shooting in Dayton a few years ago?
There was a mass shooting in Dayton a few years ago, yes.
So something that I learned at a national conference was the way their community mental health provider was expected to kind of step up and provide crisis services, and also to provide crisis services not just for victims but for the perpetrator. And so that was a whole lot of new stuff that this behavioral health center had not been prepared to do. So I wonder if, since then, if Dayton has a different understanding of crisis management than a community like ours, where we have not had to do that yet.
Right.
We never will.
you know what? I would not have that answer for you. That would be, the Dayton Police Department would probably have a great answer for that, and their connections with mental health providers in Dayton. Yeah.
You're talking about culture, that's Dayton.
Yes. But you have a fantastic opportunity as you choose your team to be able to represent different people in your community that will feel free, because you might have individuals who don't want to call police because they're afraid they're going to be taken away, and so a team where they feel safe that can help solve some of the problems that Dee's been talking about is very important.
So before I move on, I just want to see if we have more comments. Perfect.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I was wondering if you could speak to, approaches as far as the tools in the conflict resolution toolkit and when and why certain tools get applied. You mentioned, I'm thinking about situations that, might be classified as things like misdemeanors or ordinance violations that could potentially come with some kind of citation or a fine. And you mentioned responders sometimes like following callers' leads and deciding whether or not, for example, to issue a trespass citation. So can you speak to the approach of, when is a punitive response taken? I asked the question agnostically as a civil servant, but it seems like an important thing to point out.
I think we can all recognize that discretion is a part of most public safety people. So I want to be clear that community responders, they have no responsibility or legal authority to do a trespassing. In a situation where someone says, hey, this person has annoyed me like crap, I want them legally trespassed, all the responders can do is refer to law enforcement, right? So they aren't able to do that. In terms of, I think, like most people, they have responsibilities in a role. And so if community responders see something that is clearly like, oh, this needs to be escalated to police, and they will do that. But I want to be very clear that they are not like the mouth, eyes, and ears for law enforcement. And Amos, please feel free to jump in if this is not okay to say. But, I'm pretty sure there are situations where a violation could have been submitted, for instance, where community responders did not think that was necessary, right? So I think that there are extreme cases where they're like, yep, this needs to be bumped up to the law enforcement, whereas some things are like, we can handle this without having to involve law enforcement, without having to put it on paper and have someone involved in a system, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to see if we have one more before we move this presentation along. Oh, all righty. You can go to the next one. And now you all have copies, lovely copies of this presentation. Thank you to Tarek for thinking very fast on your feet. I appreciate you. We are at the responder type by city. So who's a part of these teams? So I'll list out the responder types. We have trained civilians only, clinician/social worker, EMT/paramedic/nurse, and then peer support specialist. That is the general makeup of the team. Some teams use a combination of these responder types. Some teams only have, like the first one, trained civilian only. Some may have a combination of clinician/social worker as well as trained civilian. So you'll see for the first one, with teams that have trained civilians only, meaning that these people are not some type of LSCW or some type of doctor in their field. They are just trained civilians who may have a bachelor's degree, a GED, or et cetera, and they are trained to do the work of community response. Those cities include Antioch, Evanston, Dayton, Northampton, Santa Fe, Seattle, Olympia, Portland. For a clinician/social worker, we have Ames, we have Cambridge, we have Chapel Hill, Des Moines, Iowa, Round Rock, Texas, Indianapolis, Cincinnati. I tried to find programs that are like close, at least, to you all. For EMT/paramedic and nurse, we have Asheville, we have Boulder, we have Cambridge. As you can see, Cambridge is on there twice because some of these programs use a combination of these responder types to make up their teams. This is just to give you an idea of who is on these teams and what type of calls they're responding to, as we've been previously discussing. And then we have peer support specialists. We have San Gabriel Valley, Indianapolis, again, which is on 2. We have Tucson, Portland, and San Francisco, California. These are the responder types within community response. You can go to the next slide. Yes.
When it says trained responders only, some of these individuals might be licensed social workers or might have, be psychologists, have some type of certification in psychology. It's possible. The key is that they're trained. They're not just pulling 8 people off the street and saying, hey, we want you to show up to houses. Not everybody in this room would be comfortable with saying, I want to go to everybody's house. So, they're special people with special training. So when it just says trained only, they're pretty special. Yeah.
Thank you for that add-on. So this slide goes over what credentials are required for responders. And if I'm being honest, I snatched these credentials from actual job applications from a community responder team. So in Evanston, responders must possess a high school diploma, a GED, or higher, and must possess 2 or more years of progressively responsible experience working with individuals in crises. Possession of a bachelor's degree in the social service field is preferred. So clearly, to be a part of this team, you need to have a high school diploma, a GED, or a bachelor's degree, and they have preference in bachelor's degrees in social service, but there are no hard requirements such as having a master's degree or being licensed to be a part of Evanston's team. While that might be the case for Evanston, that is not the case for Albuquerque. Albuquerque's Tier 1 behavioral health responder must possess a bachelor's degree and have 2 years of experience in social service or health-related field. And 2, the Tier 2 responder must possess a master's degree and have 4 years of experience in social service or health-related field. Their program handles a good bit of mental health calls, so it'll make more sense that they have responders who have a bachelor's degree as well as a master's degree in closely related fields to social services and things of that nature. What I didn't get to add here is I was trying to make it very clear about the minimum requirements to be a part of a community responder team, but I'll speak for the 2 that are on here. Evanston and Albuquerque mention responders having experience in multiple languages. That is very much preferred for them to have responders who can speak different languages, and I'm pretty sure that is most definitely the case in Albuquerque, right? So I can't say that there's someone on their team that speaks Spanish, but I'm almost 95% sure that there's probably someone on their team who speaks maybe more than 2 languages. But I just wanted to make that clear as well for you all that are concerned about being accessible to people whose first language may not be English or maybe something else, right? That but these programs are looking for that, and they are highlighting that in their application processes. You can go to the next one. What skills are community responder programs looking for? Again, I snatched most of this from applications that are available and online. So some of the skills that they are looking for in responders is de-escalation, mediation and conflict resolution, cultural competency. I think that is super important in our day's age, right? Trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, situational awareness, crisis intervention, effective communication, thinking about report writing and all of those things. And then to the right, I have training. So oftentimes when we talk about responder types, people are like, well, how long are they in training? What are they doing? Most programs spend up to 11 plus weeks in training. Some do longer, some may not. Most of them are at 11 weeks. And so they receive training in CAD radio, scene safety, responder self-care, which is very important as you talk about Betsy in dispatch. Like, I have heard that dispatchers are people who experience a high level of anxiety as a result of their job, right? So how do we take care of ourselves as being someone who is taking care of other people? And I think we're now in an age where we are actually talking about that. How do responders take care of themselves while being on the front line? Symptoms of substance abuse and misuse. It is important that you know the symptoms of what that looks like and you're able to get people help, even if you aren't someone who is, let's say, a clinician or a social worker. Even without those credentials, it's important for you to know what symptoms of substance abuse and misuse looks like. Sorry, guys. Child and Adult Protective Services, they spend training on that as well. Mediation and conflict resolution, crisis intervention, trauma-informed care, report writing. You'll see that the skills and the training is very similar. And many of these trainings, they receive not just once a year, but like twice a year, right? Some of these trainings they receive annually. But I just wanted to show you guys what skills are required of responders and the training that responders are receiving. And you can go to the next slide. These questions are very similar to the last ones, but I'll go through them. One, what stood out to you most about the responder types of other programs? And then two, what do you think the responder types chosen by other programs say about their goals and priorities, and how might Urbana's goals be different from other programs?
Nothing really stood out to me regarding the responder types for the programs. But when we're looking at it for Urbana, I think it's important for us to understand that we have a very complex community, not in a bad way, I think in a very good way. And we need to be mindful of the team that we create, that we're not hiring people that's like a jack of all trades but a master of none, that we're really considering having specializations within the team. So you have individuals that might be social workers or therapists that go out to the significant mental health calls that are coming in. Or we have trained civilian or peer support specialists that are going out to the noise complaints, or you know, an individual that may be homeless, and it's more of that service connection. I think our community is so diversified, I think our team needs to be diversified as well.
To piggyback on what she just said, and I totally agree, I've done some kind of homework because I probably was the one that had the least amount of knowledge, but I know that strengthening community trust, residents, especially those with marginalized communities, often feel more comfortable when non-armed, trauma-informed professionals respond to sensitive calls. The model reinforces Urbana's commitment to transparency, compassion, and equitable public safety. So I see this as really, really positive.
And, you know, with community response, this field, I think, is headed towards being, you know, super diversified and just thinking about accessibility. And that's one of the reasons why these programs don't have hard credentials, right? We know that there's certain access to level of education. Everyone can get a master's degree or have a licensure, right? But how do we ensure that people who don't have that certain level of access to education or things are able to be a part of community response? And that is why it's so important to have those certain level of minimum requirements. It's not saying that, you know, you can't have a LSCW on your team. It's just not limiting yourself to that, right? And you are right. Like we want to build. I see this as helping everyone, right? We get to build the trust within law enforcement. Because me personally, if I'm calling 911, I want a nice response. I want to know that my situation would be handled. Otherwise, if it's not a situation that police could handle, I want it to be a responder who's well equipped to do what it is that I need, who has the knowledge and the resources to help me. So I think once we get everyone on board with community response, like we can help each other here, right? And we can all be on the same team. And I think that is what community response is about. It's just getting everybody on the same team in a new way.
Is it on? Yep. Thank you. I think it's evident that the goals and priorities and the chosen categories for these calls show intent to connect with services. I think that's wonderful. It keeps our officers engaged in higher level crime activities, and it helps our residents to hopefully get connected to services. The key word being hopefully. So I think sometimes capacity issues, just individuals, and whether at the time when they're being contacted, this is the space and they're ready for services. So I think the diversified team approach is extremely important. And when we ask the question, how might Urbana's goals be different than the other programs? I don't know that, for me, not necessarily different, but maybe as we move forward in the model, very intentional about what capacities are in our own calls and what are the number of calls and do we have capacity on the other side, and being very planful about that. I think that will help to inform what that team is, because it very well may be repeat calls going out to engage, that motivational interviewing and trying to get someone to a space where they're ready to connect to services, if those services exist in our community with regard to capacity.
So, Dee, looking at that list of requirements or suggested requirement, that looked a lot like police, absent use of force and everything that falls under that umbrella, number one. Number two, do you have a pay range for Evanston as well as that other department in terms of, because it reminded me, part of the conversation we had with Evanston, there was a sticking point with respect to pay. They wanted to be paid like police.
I will say, for some of these roles that I have seen, so I will speak for Albuquerque, because obviously they are going to pay them a little bit more because they have master's degrees and stuff. I think the starting pay some of them started at like 30, but I'll give a range. I think range of this field is like 25 to maybe 50 an hour. 50 an hour is probably like your program manager, but they're on a salary. I'm just doing hourly level in my brain, right? I'm doing hourly level in my brain, but some of these roles I'm pretty sure will not get paid hourly and they are a salary employee, but the range in this field, I would say, starts at probably like 25 and go to 50. And people are advocating to be paid, the same price as policing. And I will challenge you and say that if the goal of community response is to reduce the workload of law enforcement, right? There are some calls that your officers will no longer be responding to. To me, that takes away some of the work that you guys are doing, which means there's more money for everyone to go around, right? Everyone wants to be a part of the first response system, and I just see it as legitimizing this field as part of the first response infrastructure in America. So I know it's not the best thing, and I know the unions don't love it either and stuff, but I think we can all get to a point, right? And I think if the city has the money to pay your officers 35 and them 35, then I'm happy with that, right? But if not, we all have to come to a common ground. But I do hope that, like, with this field, we are able to pay responders. This is not easy work. I'm sure you can agree on your side. It's not easy, and we want people to be able to do their work and get paid well, especially when we consider that some of these responders come from families that don't have money, that don't have access to education, right? We want to be as fair and equitable and intentional as possible.
So can I add that I'm not pushing back one way or the other.
No.
I just noticed that a lot of the qualifications sound a lot like police.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew just from conversations I had up top that I know there was an issue with pay. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, Chico, I didn't think you were being combative or trying to no, I was just making your point, and it is very similar to law enforcement, right? I'm glad that you made that connection, because some people don't see that connection here. They try to completely separate them, and although there are differences in why they exist and what they're doing, in essence, they are very similar, and they both are first responses that are handling concerns within the community.
Can I?
Again, the side of the room.
Sorry,
Also, 15-minute warning, just an FYI.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to say, it will not come to any surprise with the people that are gathered here today, which is probably one of the biggest calls for services, a domestic dispute. I happen to live in a very student-heavy area, and that is not necessarily domestic abuse, but certainly parties and noise complaints is very, very problematic in my area. My point is that I feel like one of the number one qualifications should be experience in conflict resolution. However, and that can be gained in different ways, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have a master's degree in social work. It could be, working in a non-for-profit area. But so to me, really, one of the biggest things that people need is experience resolving conflicts.
Yeah, that's literally one of the requirements.
I'll say something on pay real quick. I was trying to recruit people for Dayton's, and so I was reaching out to individuals in the community, and I think it was around like 65 to 70 something for 75 to someone who was just getting hired in, and then maybe 85 to 95 or something for whoever manages it, something like that. And that was like 3 years ago, though, so it wasn't a horrible salary. It's not quite what the police were, but because police get a lot of overtime too, but it was reasonable for a Midwest, town. If it was in LA, obviously that wouldn't cut it, but yes.
This responds to some of these questions and also interleaves with the conversation. So for those who, I think you mentioned about $35 an hour, that's approximately starting pay for Urbana police. I think it might be a little bit more than that for entry level, no education experience outside of PTI. I would say on the training I'm interested, so as you're gathering information, I'd like to see the training curriculum of the best of breed, because most of the work, just like police, is going to be on-the-job training to have people kind of conform to the standards of that program. And we certainly see that at Cunningham Township. We look at years of experience as well as education. So we have folks with no higher education, many years of experience, vice versa. And so, but the on-the-job training, honestly, has been more important than anything else. I do want to mention that some issues I anticipate, it's kind of like, it's not only goals, but kind of things that we should look at. One is clarity of lane. So we have a problem of not it in this community when it comes to homeless services, police response, transporting people to mental health facilities, mental health responders, a lot of not it. So although we want to collaborate, we need a framework in writing with agreements to collaborate. So if you could help us provide that framework in writing, agreements on how we collaborate and who has what lane, because what safety issues come when there's a not it moment, right? So there has to be clarity of lanes. And then I think, I mentioned the training requirements, getting very clear about how we respond to domestic disputes and where the lanes are, what are the factors, and really looking to Courage Connection as an expert to help guide that. And then expectations. So we, as the street outreach workers in the community throughout the county, we time and again have people will call us with the expectation that one, there is a service to bring people to, which Lisa, underlying what Lisa said, and two, that we can get people to go away. So we can just like kind of disappear them, like get them to go away and do something else. So I think some clarity around expectations about what alternative responders or community responders do, what you can expect, what are the various alternatives, also what are the legal rights. So if you have folks who are homeless, people experiencing homelessness in your community, there's a homeless bill of rights. There's constitutional rights still in this country, right, that we should adhere to. And so I think being very clear about that, and then ways in which responders can navigate those rights. So we can make sure that we are trying to produce results that are safe for everyone while navigating those rights will be important. So I just wanted to raise some of the questions that I think will need to be raised in our community.
Perfect. I'm gonna let Jaya go ahead and end us off before I go to what's next in our
Thank
last
you.
10 minutes.
So one thing I just want to clarify from some of the previous comments, especially as we do start maybe further talking about domestic violence, because that is a topic we talk about a lot in this community, is just making that differentiation between conflict and domestic violence, right? That those are different things, and kind of again leaning on courage, connection, making sure that we are being really mindful, and also being mindful about the assessment in terms of physical danger in those situations, right? That there, to Matthew's point earlier, are situations where it is not safe or appropriate to send in someone who might be putting themselves in danger as well, right? So I just like circling back to that is a whole conversation in and of itself that I think is important to this community, because like many communities, we do have high rates of domestic violence and want to make sure that we're doing more to address that. I also just wanted to touch on the qualifications piece as well. I know we're low on time, but I do want to kind of reinforce what Danielle said too, is making sure that when we're talking about the range of experience that we are not unnecessarily limiting who can be part of this response. I can say at races, we have removed degree requirements for positions that it doesn't need to be there, right? The on-the-job experience is the more important piece. We can train folks to do crisis intervention. We can train folks to help with legal advocacy. That's different than our therapists, who we do require a master's degree for. So kind of that point, as we're looking at what could a combined response look like, that we should be thinking about who are we excluding if we put in unnecessary, arbitrary degree requirements, especially since often those folks are more impacted by what we're talking about, and we want to make sure that we're including everybody in this process.
Thank y'all so much. Y'all always bring up great points. I am always floored when I go back and tell people how this meeting was. I was like, I can tell that y'all care about y'all communities and y'all want to put intentionality into what we're doing right now. And for that, I can appreciate. And it alleviates problems in the end when you're like, hey, what about this? And we're 2 months out and the paper's almost written. I just want to say that I truly appreciate the intentionality from each and every one of you. And more to come, more to come. With us having about 9 minutes, could you go to the next slide, Tarek, please? So I must admit, at some point, I want to give you all homework. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know everybody is not happy about it. I promise it won't be a pain, okay? It won't be a pain. So I want to give you what we call an 85 scenario assignment. If you're looking at your nice handout of the presentation, you'll see an Excel screenshot. And essentially, we will put together a sample of the various call narratives and call types from Urbana's data. We want you all to look at them and say yes or no to whether or not you think that this call is community responder appropriate, and then we'll leave a field for you to add your comments. So if you're looking here, you'll see that the call type was suspicious person, and one of the narratives is homeless man laying down and covered up by front door. Caller wants removed. You would read that and you would assess on your own whether or not you think that this call needs an armed response or a community response. It's just a simple yes, no, or I am unsure. And then you can leave comments as to why you put that, right? So one, I want to ask, would you all feel comfortable doing this exercise today? If I sent it to you tomorrow, do you guys feel comfortable doing this? If not, what do you think would help you all be more comfortable to do this for your own data? Okay, everybody's feeling, and the reason why I asked, everything has a strategy behind it. The reason why I asked is because in my last contract, when I sent this out to my task force, a lot of them felt like I could have provided them more information on the responder type. They were like, I don't know, this answer depends on who the responder type is gonna be. So now you have a breadth of information on the skills that are required of responders, the type of responders that are needed to do this work, and I think it'll give you a clear understanding of whether you think that this is, that the calls that you'll see is a call that you will want a community responder handling in Urbana. This will be all Urbana's data, and so you get to take my job for a little bit and look at the data and assess whether or not you think that this is a good call for a community response in Urbana. I'm hearing that there are no concerns about this assignment. Uh-oh, there we go.
How many scenarios and the time to complete?
85 tomorrow.
85, maybe more or less, we'll see. Again, I'm not trying to make this very hard on you all. I do recognize that you still have other jobs, roles, and priorities to do, and some of you all may even be parents or grandparents. I don't want to get in the way of that. So I will give you, I can't say when because I'm still working on finalizing the data to pull all of this together for you all, but I will give you more than enough time. I won't spur this on you and be like, hey, get this to me. How long it would take? Oh, well, I think that this assignment could take you maybe 30 to an hour. Because all you're selecting is yes, no. I mean, if you're somebody who likes to provide comments on every single one, then it might take you a little longer, right? But if you're just reading the call narrative and selecting yes, no, or I'm unsure, then it won't take you very long at all.
I'm still in.
Okay. I love you. I promise I will give more than enough time for you all to complete this. I won't just drop it in your inbox like, hey, get this to me by tomorrow. I know you all are very busy, but I do appreciate you guys for being willing to get this done. And like I said, reviewing the data, when I started this job, I had no clue about dispatch centers. I just saw a dispatch center for the first time like a couple months ago. And I never thought I would be so emotional reviewing the data and understanding why people call 911. So I'm gonna give you that warning and say some of these calls might make you be like, oh my goodness, or maybe even make you cry a little bit. But I think it's important for you all to see why residents are calling 911 and how we can shape all of this to move forward to identify call types that could be handled by our responders in Urbana. So with that being said, you can go to the next slide and just see if there are any questions or concerns or anything. Yes.
So we've done a lot of deep dive research into the calls that we're receiving in Urbana. I just wanted to ask, I may be putting the carriage before the horse here a little bit. Are we going to get an analysis on how this model could be integrated with the model of co-response that's already taken place in Urbana?
Yes. So we have talked to Chief Boone and his people, and they have agreed that they will share information with us on the co-response. So we're not trying to duplicate efforts and none of that, right? So we're going to look at the calls that are currently being handled by co-response and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. And if we are, or let me not say duplicating efforts, but we are very clear on what community response is doing and what co-response is doing. How do we say the lane work? We're trying to make clarity of the lane. So we just haven't gotten there yet. Yes, of course.
Can I also?
Yep.
I think there's also other co-response models in some of our sister cities, and naturally I would think we would all love to see down the line, don't know the time frame, but some likeness possibly. So I don't know if that's something that we also consider, just knowing what other approaches are underway, or just to integrate model across, because we have people that go from one city to the next city or back and forth.
Thank you.
Just on the topic, I wanted to share, and I was going to send this out by email so it is shared. We have done research on this issue for the last 2 years, had multiple interns work on it, and had several forums. So I want, LEAP will add very valuable pieces to the research, but if you go to ctso.org and click on reports, it actually has, the top list is alternative community and crisis response, a list of models and resources, and then the second is alternative crisis response models. That's from our presentation, May of 2025. So there's like so much research and work being done in this area. It's really pretty awesome. And the first tab is resources, and there are 19 different reports across the country that are on that list, as well as US models and a few international models. So I just wanted, as we were looking to kind of move this conversation forward when it was stalled under the last administration, we just started doing this research. So I just wanted to share that as one additional resource that folks can look at now.
Thank you.
I do have one more request. Can we get a copy of the programmatic metrics that these other alternative response programs have? So how are they measuring success? How are they also measuring areas of growth for their program?
Absolutely. I believe that will be next presentation, like the impact and the research and all that. If we don't shift around, we will have it. We can definitely get that. With our 5 o'clock, I just want to say next steps is completing the data, getting you guys the 85 scenario assignment, and then starting our one-on-one meetings. I'm not going to bum rush you and be like, let's try to get all these meetings done before the holiday. So please expect to meet with me sometime in January and February, people, depending on how your calendars go. But look out for that. Thank you guys so much for an amazing session today.
Just very briefly, a few housekeeping items. Our next meeting will be different than the prior ones. It'll be January 29th, 2026, so at the end of the month. It'll still be here at the IMC at 3:30. Additionally, thank you guys all for coming out today, and thank you to the audience for being with us in spite of the snowy weather. Meeting materials from the last session as well as for this session can be found on urbanail.gov/meetings. The YouTube video from the last session from November 6th is up there, along with a written summary of what we discussed that is also included in the packet materials for today's session, December 11th. And as soon as I type up the stuff for this will be up there too. So, yep, thank you.